This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
White women are turning to One Nation, just like they did Trump. We've also got first-generation migrants turning to One Nation, again, just like Trump. We're seeing the same thing happen. And because we're seeing the same thing happen, we've got the lessons. We can learn from it.
If you want the doll for life, free marijuana, vote green.
There's a bunch of ratbags and a bunch of idiots, and I got no time.
The Greens get way too good a run in the Australian media, way too free a run.
Frankly, I've always found the Greens to be a real serious danger.
Hello, comrades. It is Sunday, May the 31st, 2026, and this is Serious Danger, a podcast about green politics in Australia. It's not an official Greens Party podcast. Thank you for asking. It's produced by Michael the Griffin. My name is Tom Ballard, coming to you from the Republic of Ireland in the beautiful city of Kilkenny in County Kilkenny. I love this country. I want to move here. People are way nicer and more left-wing. So I'm a fan. My guest co-host this week can be found on Insta at comrade_Neha_. They're a co-founder of racial justice organisation Democracy in Colour, a community organiser, a recent star panellist on the SBS Insight program on the rise of One Nation. Neha Madhok, hello. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Tom. So good to be here.
Great to have you on. Maybe just briefly, there's a few sort of hits there in your bio. Would you mind letting our listeners know a little bit about you and your politics and where you're coming from?
Yeah, I guess I consider myself a democratic socialist. I really believe that governments have a really big role, actually, in shaping strong, cohesive communities, and that government can be a force for good. It can actually deliver good things for people rather than for corporations, which is the fun system that we currently have. I actually want to see my taxes go towards universal preschool for everyone. I'm not ever going to have children, but I think that that is something really important. And I think that that's something that we've kind of lost in our politics these days. We don't have a shared collective imagination anymore. We're kind of just what's in it for me? Where am I going to get the outcome? What is this policy going to do for me? But we're not necessarily asking what is this going to do for the country. And that is something that when I think back to when I was young and growing up is a very different world to that. I really thought that things couldn't get as bad as they could when we had the Howard government, which was the government that I was growing up under. And I was like, wow, this is really bad. But even then we had this sense of who we are as a country, where we're going, we're moving forward, good things are coming. And now it's we're just looking at the present or backwards. And
I've read a lot lately about, the death of the future, or how the future just doesn't exist, or we don't have a popular conception of the future, or of things getting better or improving. It is either, to Tim Wilson's credit, Tim Wilson recently said that Labor's approach is about managing decline. And I think, well, obviously he's selling bullshit, and of course the Liberal parties are going to make things better, but I think that's probably a pretty accurate summary of how it feels, managed decline, as opposed to, seriously transforming our country for the better, to actually make it better than it was in the past, rather than this kind of return to a nostalgic view of an Australia that never was.
Yeah, it's I feel like something happened in the 80s. And I mean, I wasn't around in the 80s, but what I'm kind of imagining is
I was born in November 1989. Okay, Neha, go fuck yourself, all right? I wasn't really in the 80s either. I'm a 90s kid. Thank you.
You're just a month older than Taylor Swift.
There you go.
But yeah, the way that I imagine the 80s is I don't know, the 60s and 70s ended and everyone was like, wow, we've made so much progress. Now let's just snort a whole heap of coke, throw money at the share market and just have the best time. Let's float the dollar. Let's just open everything up. Yeah. Who cares about universal higher education? Put it on HEX. HEX will never go up. It'll just be $500. Nothing will possibly ever change. And I feel like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan really sold everyone on neoliberalism, being everything's going to be fine. It's going to be this great party. And now here we are 30 years later seeing the real consequences of neoliberalism. And I am yeah, I'm sad to say that I do think that the Labor governments that we've had since the Hawke-Keating era have, up until I'd say this budget, been managing decline because they were tinkering around the edges of neoliberal policy and occasionally doing a little bit of social democracy. Occasionally, like, yes, this is maybe one good thing here or one good thing there, but even like the NDIS, which is one of Labor's greatest accomplishments in the last decade or so, privatized system, basically set up to fail, and now it's being defunded in the latest budget. And what a shame for the legacy of the Gillard-Rudd governments that the Albanese government then came along and basically tanked the one major achievement of that government.
Now, is my understanding, I think you've worked a little bit for some news from Labor MPs at the New South Wales and federal level, maybe. But obviously, there you go. We just heard some critiques of the Labor Party. I know recently on social media.
Very happy to.
Happy to do that. Also, throw a few punches or some critiques of the Greens as well. On the SBS show, you said you're not excited about voting for the Greens. So tell us a little bit about that, about where your take on the sort of Labor Greens status quo at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. The way that I explain it to people is I showed up to O Week in 2008 at my university ready to join a progressive party. I was like, I want to be queer. I want to be an activist. Like, let's go. And I went to the Green stall first, and there was this lovely guy, but he would not look me in the eye and he could not make conversation with me. And like, I was quite an awkward person at 18, right? Like, I also really struggled. But I was like, just sign me up. And like, I was ready, and he could not recruit me. And I turned around and tried to join. I didn't know about Labor factions or any of that stuff. That was beyond me then. I was just like, yeah, Kevin Rudd seems cool. Tried to sign up to Young Labor, but they were like really weirdly cliquey and not particularly nice to me either. And so I just kind of wandered off and found the student newspaper and was like, well, maybe this will be my place. And that was when I met one of the organisers from Young Labor Left. And he had done community organising. So he actually was like, oh, you care about the student newspaper? We actually run the student union. Come and get involved in the student union. We're doing all of this great activism. And then I was like, oh, all these people who run this thing are from Young Labor Left. Well, they must be cool. So I'll join. And like, I think there are some really good people in the Labor Party. I often tell people that there are people with radical hearts, but with very pragmatic mindsets in the party. And there are psychopaths and narcissists because it's politics.
Yeah.
And it's a party of government. And it's going to, like, every political party that has an ounce of power or chance of power is going to attract bad actors and people with bad faith. And I think that's something that I think people find hard to reconcile with the Greens. So I've never been anti-Green. I've never been opposed to the Greens. I have always wanted this kind of beautiful idea that maybe one day the Greens and Labor can work together, which I understand is just a complete pipe dream and it's not happening anytime soon. But we can hope.
I don't know. Shit changes, man. Shit changes.
Exactly.
The crazier things have happened. I think that's fair to say.
And I do think that the solution, the way that we fight back on the far right is going to require a united left. And it is going to mean that everyone to the left of the Liberals or the Teals needs to be part of that broad coalition. So when it comes to the Greens, I guess, I love a lot of the policies. And again, I think there are some fantastic people in the Greens. I think there are some incredible MPs and senators. But similarly... And podcasters, yeah.
Yes.
And like I said on the show, I genuinely am like a swinging Labor Greens voter. It often depends on who's the MP who's running, what they're running on. And usually if I'm one of those people who votes below the line. So I will like actively number like my favourite people in the Greens and Labor against each other. I'm one of those people.
Oh, wow.
But basically, I guess I want to take you back to maybe, I think it was the 2019 election. And one of the biggest issues was Stop Adani. And, the Adani coal mine, for those who maybe don't remember, was meant to open, I think, in the Great Barrier Reef and was going to be a gateway to opening up mining in Queensland. It was going to be an absolute disaster for the reef and for climate change and our emissions targets and everything. So understandably, the climate movement fought really hard against Adani and did some incredible work and got really, really, really close. And I would say, like, achieved 9 out of 10 of their objectives. Like, that coal mine is nowhere near what it was going to be. It's basically a disaster. But what happened was Bob Brown organised a roadshow. He put people in a van and they drove from Melbourne up to central Queensland. And I think the idea was to have conversations with working people about climate change. And that idea itself, not a bad one. I think that's great. I think greenies and workers should be talking to each other more. But what ended up happening was it came across to people like they were being lectured at or being condescended to by middle-class people from the cities, people who don't understand their struggle. And when you live in one of those transition communities, those communities where there are coal mines that are now very much in decline and are being managed out over the next couple of decades, you have an existential crisis because often your entire family has worked in those coal mines. You growing up and you're thinking, well, I'm also going to work in the mine. And then to have these people who come from out of town come and tell you that you're basically a piece of shit for doing this and, like, how dare you have a $150,000 job and look after your family with that? You should do something else. What you can do, unclear, but you should do something else. Now, that in itself, again, can be managed, right? But then we have the forces like Advance and the broad far-right network who have been running this concerted campaign for at least the last 15 years against the Greens and making the Greens look like middle-class people who are out of touch, inner-city latte sippers, champagne socialists, like all of that stuff. And so when those people came to their town, that's what they saw. That's what they felt. They felt that caricature almost of a Greens voter that bloody Pauline Hanson has in her cartoon. That's what they were experiencing and feeling, even though that was not the intention. And even though I think it, like, had it been done differently, it could have been done really well and could have been really transformative and powerful. And so I still think that it's so important for Greenies to have a good understanding of class and a good class base. But I think what is difficult is where you have Greens voters. And Greens voters are generally in the inner city. They're generally university educated, generally well off. And, you know, I say that as someone who lives in the inner west and, like, has a decent middle class income. So I'm also talking about myself there. But you are then disconnected from the realities of what it's like in places like the western suburbs. Like, I was saying to a friend that I've never had this much money before in my life. And I still feel a little bit poor, but I can't even imagine what it would be like if I had kids, if I had a partner as well to support, if I had a bigger mortgage, like all of that stuff. So I can understand, I guess, where people's resentment comes from. And so when I think about the Greens, mainly I'm like, I want them to do better. I think that this party can be so much more. But right now, what comes across to people is like you've got these people who come across like policy wonks and lawyers and very measured podcasters. Very, like, at least on this podcast, right? I feel like we can be real, we can talk, we can swear, we can just be like, this is what's going on. But when you're a parliamentarian, you kind of go into, and even like when I was a CEO of a nonprofit organization, you go into like, we've got to speak in a measured way. We have to, like, you know, speak to this and speak to that. Like, something happens. And I think the reason that Pauline resonates so much is because she sounds like the people who she's connecting with. She sounds like them. She looks like them. She feels like them, even though she is not for them. And ironically, they've managed to make it look like the Greens are not for you, even though the Greens policies are actually for working people. But the outside veneer doesn't look like it is. And it's like this marketing swap that's happened, which is capitalist genius, but it's bloody frustrating.
Yes, tell me about it. Well, we're going to get into that. The big issues that continue to dominate Australian politics, of course, racism, or what are the forces that are driving the surge in One Nation. I want to talk to you about that, Neha, and also housing, the big fallout from the budget. We'll get into that very shortly. Just quickly, we want to thank our patrons for supporting the show. Thank you to Adam, Dale, James, Charney, Brumfield, Lucas, Tony, Pat, Georgiana, Chris, Thomas, and Gary. Thank you so much. So go to patreon.com/seriousdangerau for just $3 a month. You can become a patron, a danger dog, and get bonus content. This week's patrons only episode was our big chat with Chris Warren from Democracy for CPSU. This is a caucus within the public sector union that are currently organising to try and make that union more democratic. Really interesting conversation about what's going on in that particular campaign and the union movement more broadly. If you want to listen to it, just become a patron, patreon.com/seriousdangerau.
I think sometimes being a middle-class Anglo-Saxon Australian almost feels like we're not allowed to say anything anymore.
Okay, well, we've already touched on Pauline because it's impossible to talk about Australian politics without talking about her and the surge of One Nation. It's sort of dominating a lot of political discourse at the moment, and I thought you'd be a great person to talk about all this, Neha. Brief overview. South Australian state election in March, One Nation pick up 4 lower house seats, 3 upper house seats, including the wonderful Corey Bernardi and his return to Australian politics. They won the Farrer by-election. That was its first federal lower house seat election in its 29-year history. They have, of course, One Nation MPs from defectors like Barnaby Joyce, but this is the first time they actually got voted in by the public, the good people of Farrer. Their primary vote was just 6.4% at the 2025 election. Polling now has it sitting pretty comfortably at around 27 to 25%, getting up to 27 in some polls. There were reports midweek that Pauline Hanson wants to move her senatorial office from Brisbane to Rockhampton, which is read as an indication that she is quite seriously considering running for the lower house seat of Capricornia. And getting her into the lower house, of course, might allow her to potentially lead the new opposition, which is made up of One Nation MPs. Last weekend, we got this big new MRP poll from Redbridge and Accent Research, with some pretty wild predictions. Basically, it was saying if an election is held tomorrow, Labor would win just 76 seats, so still a majority, but a majority of 1. Coalition would be wiped out effectively to just 12 seats, the Greens on 1, and One Nation on 53 seats. Cosamaris from Redbridge is predicting that in some seats, the party could hit a primary vote of above 50%, and they'd effectively be the new opposition. He's talking about 2 new parties in Australian politics, or 2 parties, one representing the cities and one representing the regions, that being One Nation. That polling suggested Andrew Hastie has a 100% chance of losing his seat of Canning to a One Nation candidate, and Angus Taylor, the current leader of the coalition, would have a 98% chance of losing his seat of Hume, which I think we could all agree would be pretty funny. The poll just sampled more than 6,000 Australian voters, so that's a pretty large sample size. And MRP poll is sort of this new process which tries to predict individual seat outcomes. It was conducted between April 29 and May 14th, so didn't really capture the response to the federal budget on May 12th. So that's important to keep in mind. And it'd be fair to say there's some other polling that doesn't quite get as dramatic as this MRP poll, but certainly got a lot of attention. Neha, what did you make of that? Did you follow that particular poll, and more broadly, what do you think of this massive surge in support for One Nation?
Yeah, I think it's something that we need to take really bloody seriously. I think that every single progressive person, every single progressive organisation needs to be having war room style conversations about how we turn things around, and we need to do it very quickly. So I remember when Albanese's government first got elected, there was this real sense of complacency amongst a lot of progressives. There was this sense of, weird thing happened to the Greens. What was that about? And like a lot of head scratching and trying to figure out what happened, which I don't know. I still really don't know what happened there. I think a lot of people have opinions, but we did see generally that Australia went, Trump, absolutely not. Vote Labor, safe as houses. We know what we're going to get. And I think a lot of people went, all right, there's no real Liberal opposition. One Nation are just too crazy and weird and on the fringes. Pauline's getting old. Nothing will happen. Well, guess what? Trump's also getting old, and look at him. Biden was also getting old. It doesn't stop anyone. So I think as well, what is really concerning is the way that the media is reporting on One Nation now. They are reporting on them as the opposition party, completely normalizing them as like a populist right-wing party. They are far right. This is a group of Nazis. And when I am calling them Nazis, because that is what the majority of them are, they are transphobic, they are racist, they want to deport people, they want to lock up trans people and people of color. That is, in my opinion, the definition of being a Nazi. They're supported by them. Why are we acting like this is okay? And I say that, and then I immediately am about to contradict myself. Because I do also hear, like, when it comes to data and the research and everything, it is also important, right, to recognize why people are moving to One Nation. And I think that's the thing that the left is finding really hard to do at the moment. To go, one, that One Nation is exceptionally dangerous. We need to be mobilizing and organizing very quickly and taking this very seriously. I am saying to people that we are in our 2015 moment. This is like, remember when everyone was saying Hillary was going to win, it's going to be fine, don't worry. Remember when they said Brexit was never going to happen, people wouldn't do that? People are now saying, oh, Pauline's not going to win, it's going to be fine. We have preferential voting, we have compulsory voting, don't worry about it. No, we have to worry about it. But the second thing is that if you don't take people's concerns seriously, they're just going to double down and they're just going to go, yep, this is the right thing to do. Because One Nation have managed, and like this broad far-right network, organizations like Advance, organizations like the IPA, they have been working for the last 30 years to discredit and undercut everything that we are calling for and pushing for. And so when we are then going and saying, hey, this is a problem for all these reasons, we just sound like the establishment because that is what people have been taught to think. And so what we have to do is undo almost the way that we come across and find new entry points to talk to people.
Well, you were out there talking to people. You're on this SBS Insight episode. It was called the One Nation Wave. You had a whole bunch of One Nation voters there, supporters. People had sort of changed often from the Liberal Party, previously supported the Liberals and were now voting One Nation. There were some critics on the panel. Kosamaris was on there. George Brandis was on there, sort of to shit on the Liberal Party, which we all enjoyed. You had one of the guys who makes her cartoons in the audience. He annoyed me. Tell us about that experience. What was it like being on that panel? And did you get to talk to many of them sort of off camera that gave you any greater insight into why these folks are turned on by Pauline?
Yeah, the SBS experience was fascinating and is a big reason why I have come back from it feeling like Cassandra from the Greek myths.
Right.
For those, if you may not know, Cassandra was someone who was running around saying, hey, this horrible thing is happening. Everyone needs to take it seriously. And people were going, don't worry, don't worry. And then, of course, the horrible thing happened. What I saw very clearly was when Kos was talking, and I think a lot of this stuff was cut out, but what I was seeing when Kos was talking was the way that the One Nation voters were reacting. And he was saying, right now there is a wall. So if you're in Sydney, there's a wall at Parramatta and One Nation won't be able to go much further than that because of all these demographic reasons. And the Farah people, the One Nation videographer people and some of the voters there were all immediately shaking their heads and going, nope, that's not right. We've actually got a lot of women. White women are turning to One Nation, just like they did Trump. We've also got first-generation migrants turning to One Nation, again, just like Trump. We're seeing the same thing happen. And because we're seeing the same thing happen, we've got the lessons. We can learn from it. But what is particularly concerning for me, right, is these are our people. We can talk to white women. We can remind them where their allegiance should lie. Because do you want to align yourself with patriarchy? Do you want to align yourself with the really insidious nature of being a trad wife? Then you've got the first generation immigrants. And unfortunately, it is my people who are partly to blame in this circumstance. I'm Indian, Indian Australian. My family are Hindu, and Hindu nationalism has massively been on the rise in India and now amongst the diaspora. And unfortunately, we are seeing that now. So people are turning to One Nation partly because of their own Islamophobia. So that's really concerning because now the Indian community is the number one migrant community to Australia, which is bloody fantastic. Representation, great food, great stuff happening, but also some of the downsides include right-wing nationalism.
Yeah, I mean,
So
there was much
there
made
is-
on the program of this guy who was from Fiji and Indian background as well, but like passionately identifies as a Australian and was like, you know, Pauline isn't racist. She just loves her country a lot. He was really on board. There was a brief package from an anonymous woman who I believe was from Bangladeshi background, who was seriously considering voting One Nation because, she was seriously worried about Islamist ideology and Islamists operating in Australia. She thinks the left are too soft on them and the right aren't taking them seriously. And she thinks that Pauline is the one person talking about that. So, yeah, there were all these, and you know, people see these March for Australia rallies, and people of Asian backgrounds, and people are either first generation immigrants or you know, have come out themselves, and still don't seem to pick up the vibe that One Nation is not
No.
exactly fighting for your best interests there.
No, and I've seen videos of Hindu nationalists who've then gone to Israel for some reason, and I guess tried to befriend IDF soldiers.
Correct.
And those IDF soldiers have treated them like Arabs because they cannot tell us apart. They just see a brown person. And this is what we need. Like, I need my fellow brown people to understand you may not be Muslim, but they cannot tell. I had neighbors knock on my door. This part didn't make it into the SBS package, but I shared this story on Insight, which was that after September 11, we were one of the only brown families on the street. We'd lived on that street for a decade. Our neighbor had the gall to come and knock on our door and ask us if we were Muslim.
Oh my
She had
God.
known us for a decade.
Yeah.
Why was our character not enough? Why was it not enough that she had known us, she had watered our plants, we'd watered hers? Why was that not enough? She had to know. And then 2 years later, we had a rock thrown through our window. We called the police. They never showed up. What a horror. What a shock. Cops, useless. But that was definitely racially motivated. It was one of those times that like Pauline had put on a burqa or something. It was like one of those Islamophobia moments on the rise. And so thinking that the party that in 1996 said that we're being swamped by Asians, that then has had this crusade against Islam, that yearns for a white Australia, why would they not turn on you when you are no longer useful to them? They will. We're seeing it with Usha Vance in the US. We're seeing how she's being treated. I'm so frustrated by the pick-me's, and they are pick-me's, and it is this psychology of that's a bully. I'm going to stand next to the bully so that I don't get bullied. But you're going to get bullied eventually when they run out of people to go after.
I would like broadly summarize the sentiment, and we've talked about this a lot on the show, of the supporters on the show, and the general vibe I get from a lot of One Nation supporters is an anti-political sentiment, right? That these are people who completely understandably, as we've said, you know, fair play to you, this is a shitty two-party system. It is fucking us over. It isn't making your life better. Your grievance, your anger, your anti-political sentiment at how crooked the system is that doesn't actually deliver for you, that analysis is entirely justified, and I get it. Obviously, the answers that Pauline are providing are not the ones that we seek. But yeah, that kind of anger at the political duopoly is completely fair enough. It's a huge motivator for people who get involved with the Greens. But it was interesting. Kosamaris is sort of saying, based on his research, that he really thinks that immigration and culture war issues are much lower motivators for the One Nation support than those other material factors or just a general sense of being pissed off at the political system. And I found that interesting, but I guess I do kind of struggle with it because, as you say, like you cannot disentangle Islamophobia from One Nation's agenda. It's what they're talking about all the time. These are people who want a royal commission into Islam. Pauline had that no good Muslims quote. They're talking seriously about a Muslim ban. Like that, they're like, yeah, what Trump did there is great. no details to this policy, but yes, we should ban immigration from Muslim majority countries. They've said that really explicitly and champion it and put it as like their number one issue. So I don't know. How do you think about that stuff?
Yeah, and it was really interesting when Kos said that. They actually didn't tell me that. They were immediately going to turn around to me and be like, so Neha, is that shocking to you? So I was genuinely surprised when they did. They're like, yes, actually, let me get my hijab. But yeah, it was actually surprising and honestly a small relief, I've got to say, that if it is not the number one factor, and it is actually backed up by a bunch of research. So I was on the marriage equality campaign in 2017, and at that time we did heaps of research into, what Australians care about, all that stuff, what resonates. And the two guiding values that Australians hold dear, fairness and equality.
Ugh.
And so that's why we also decided to call it marriage equality, because love is love didn't resonate, because it didn't talk about fairness, it didn't talk about our mates. And so Australians were just like, what of it? But once we framed it in, this is about everyone having a fair go, this is about your colleagues and your neighbours and you all being equal. And of course, by that point, most people knew a queer person. People went, yeah, okay, that sounds fair. Interestingly, also, we were like, how do we reach migrant communities? And we went and said, Pauline Hanson is against marriage equality. And migrants were like, sign me up. We love the gays. Let's go. So there is so much more that brings us together, right? I think that's what I really want to get across. I truly believe that most Australians care about fairness and most Australians want to look after each other, even the One Nation voters. And I saw this play out in some of my conversations. So I tried to talk to, I guess, a couple of the people who were in former Labor seats or former National seats who had recently switched to One Nation. And I just tried to have a bit of a chat with them to understand and just ask them questions. I was like, I'm not here to try and change your mind. You do you. I just want to know what your values are. I want to understand why you've done this. And one of the people was really interesting because he was saying, I'm not racist, was one of the first things he said. And he was like, I worked in an abattoir with a lot of Muslim people. I know that there are good Muslims. This isn't right. But I want to blow the whole thing up.
Yep.
I just fuck everything. The Nats won't deliver for us. It's either the Nats or One Nation. And then the other person was from a part of Adelaide that has been absolutely just forgotten. And I lived in Adelaide for a number of years, and going to places like Elizabeth in the northern suburbs, it's so clear that Holden was here.
Yeah.
So the northern suburbs of Adelaide was where we had car manufacturing, and they were towns. Like you go through the streets and it's like Holden Avenue. Like all the streets are named after cars. Everything is like car themed. And so you just like, you're looking around and you're going, this place feels depressing as hell. This place is sad. And it's one of those places that is considered a safe Labor seat and so just forgotten. And similarly, where I grew up, the seat of Werriwa, when I was growing up there, safe Labor seat. And so we never heard from anyone. No matter how much you complained about the lack of lifts at the train station, the local hospital was one of the worst in Sydney, whatever. Safe Labor seat, don't worry about it. The second it became marginal, suddenly things changed. So of course people are going to want to keep their seat marginal. And they're going to go, okay, well, if I vote Liberal, that's going to send a message to Labor. Now, as progressives, this is not helpful. This is how we end up in that two-party system of just working within neoliberalism and chopping and changing and chopping and changing. But people think that the only alternative is the Liberal Party. And so I'm not surprised, right, when these people say, I'm voting One Nation, because you have been economically abandoned. All people want in those areas is trains that work, right, and that you can get onto and they're cheap and affordable, that you can access healthcare. Like, I had never experienced a gap payment for going to the doctor until I moved to the inner west of Sydney, because in the western suburbs, you cannot run a clinic if you are not 100% bulk billing. People can't afford it. They just won't come. It was only like moving here that I was like, what do you mean there's a $50 gap? What? That's crazy. I'll just line up for 3 hours like everybody else and wait for my free doctor visit. But that is the reality for people. And I am not surprised that Werriwa is one of the seats that Pauline Hanson wants to go after. It is where all of the issues of like the Labor Party and the Liberal Party taking those seats for granted have come together into a big crashing mess. So you've got people moving into that area from the east, from the north, people who can't afford the nice parts of Sydney, who are now going, well, this is the only part that we can afford. It is now up to, that's like an hour to an hour and a half drive out of Sydney to get, and that's the fastest way to get to and from where you need to go. And that involves paying $60 to $80 of tolls every single week. While you get toll relief, it's not enough. The trains, while they're better, they're still not, it's not the kind of servicing that you're getting in other parts of Sydney. And then you've got these Legoland houses all going up. There's no greenery, so you've got urban heat islands. They're basically giant tents, so it's just aircon pumping out. So you're just contributing to the climate crisis on top of all of this. And then people are just like, my life sucks. Like living here kind of sucks. It's just a bit shit, but I can't afford to live anywhere else. And I'm angry. And so, think about it. You're 36 years old. You've got 2 kids. One of them has to get to primary school. The other one has to get to preschool. Now, the preschool that you could get into took you three years to get in. That is 20 kilometers west of where you live. The only way to get there is driving. And then from there, you're going to have to park your car, get on a train, and go into the city to work. And then you've got to do all of that again on the way home. So people are starting their days at 4, 5 a.m. just to work a regular 9 to 5. Of course they're bloody pissed.
It was that person from Adelaide, was that Evelyn Bird, I believe, from South Australia, who I did, I must say, I did laugh. She just really loves how attractive Pauline was. She said that she met Pauline Hanson and she said, wow, the camera doesn't do you justice. You're so beautiful. You're so beautiful. It was kind of a sweet moment. I don't agree. I don't see it myself, but I'm glad that Evelyn was dazzled by the showbiz looks of Pauline Hanson.
Yeah, and what was interesting is when I tried to speak to her afterwards, and I don't know if she'll hear this, and I hope it doesn't come across badly. But both myself and Andrew, who was one of the progressives from Adelaide there, we both, I think, wanted to chat to her because we were both quite excited by some of the things that she was saying. We both really felt ourselves in her story. And I noticed that she wouldn't make eye contact with me after the show. She would talk to Andrew, but it felt like she was humoring him a bit and she was kind of like trying to brush me off. And this is really, really common, actually. And what it is that when you talk about race and racism, particularly white people, but anyone it has happened to me when talking about Aboriginal rights, you feel shame. And shame is not a motivating emotion, which is why the right loves it so much. It's why they love to make people feel shame. Because you go inwards, you go, oh, I'm a bad person, protect myself, and you kind of lash out at others and you double down on your own feeling. But we know, in anti-racism work, we know that people have a shame response. And so a big part of the work is trying to get people to recognize the shame response, acknowledge it together so that we can all just move past it. Because racism sucks. Systemic racism has caused immense harm, but we all live in white supremacy. We're all part of this system. I've also been part of creating white supremacist harm because I live in this society. So we all just have to tackle it together. But that was really hard to do in the 5 minutes we had after the show. So I kind of
solve
just
racism in that 5 minutes in the green room? That's weird. No. Well, I tell you someone who could be out there fighting for a better tomorrow and being a staunch anti-racist is a new One Nation MP. I don't know if you saw this story about Jason Virgo. newly elected One Nation MP, has broken down during an emotional maiden speech telling South Australia's Parliament he has a Muslim boyfriend from Indonesia and loves migrants. Jason Virgo won the MacKillop seat in the South Australian House of Assembly at the state election earlier this year. One Nation is widely associated with anti-immigration and anti-LGBTQ+ positions, but Mr. Virgo's speech appeared to turn that policy on its head. I've been openly gay throughout my entire adult life, Mr. Virgo told the House. I do not wave the flag in the air as I walk down the street. I prefer people to find out these things naturally. And if someone does seek to weaponize who I am, that says more about them than it does about me. The new MP then fought back tears as he turned to the subject of his immigrant partner, Risang Al-Farid, paying tribute to him as the love of my life and thanking him for his support. Risang was born in Indonesia, a Muslim, and is now a proud Australian. Our closest friendship circle is made up largely of immigrants from China, India, and the Philippines. I love migrants. The overwhelming majority are simply searching for a better life. The two things can be true at once, and I do believe migration levels in recent years have been too high. Quite an interesting moment. This has got a lot of attention, we're a little viral around the world. I don't know. What are we to make of Jason Virgo, gay One Nation MP with a Muslim boyfriend who loves migrants?
I have some very specific, somewhat niche thoughts. One is Adelaide.
Yas Queen.
The only
Slay.
Exactly. The only thing keeping Adelaide alive, like we all know that Adelaide is a sleepy, giant country town.
Mm-hmm.
And those of us in Sydney and Melbourne love to poke a little bit of fun at our South Australian friends. The only thing keeping Adelaide young, vibrant, and remotely interesting is migrants. Otherwise, all of the young people move to Sydney and Melbourne for jobs. There are no jobs in Adelaide. When I lived there, it was a population in decline. Adelaide was losing people. The only thing that's changed it is the Indian community moving into the northern suburbs and Afghan refugees and Afghan community and Sudanese people. They are bringing the life to Adelaide, and they are such a big part of the grassroots art scene. But also hilariously, I mentioned that I was in student politics. Jason and I were both in Young Labour Left together.
What? For real?
Yes.
You know this guy?
Yes.
Oh my God. Yeah, so he's a former Labor Party member. He also ran as a candidate for the Australian Sex Party, which was founded in 2009. So yeah, I guess he's been a little bit all over the map and has now ended up in One Nation. That's crazy.
Yeah. And he wasn't around in Young Labour Left very long because he was like, I'm not here for this, and went off, I think, to either the Greens or the Sex Party. And we were all like, okay, you do you.
Good luck, mate.
But genuinely, I'm just puzzled.
Yeah.
And oddly, this sort of thing was more common than you would expect in student politics. Like this kind of like drifting between very left wing to right wing. And I don't know why, but I saw a couple of people do it. And the only thing that they all had in common was, I would say, a sense of self that maybe wasn't as developed. And that maybe that like, I don't know, I just got this real sense that there was like insecurity, or that they were like looking for something, that they were trying to find like a sense of belonging or a sense of wholeness through politics, and that they weren't finding it with us at the time. I have a feeling he will probably leave.
Well, I mean, Sarah Game was the previous One Nation Legislative Council member who did eventually go off on her own. Yes, certainly came out with a few speeches that were didn't strike you as sort of classic One Nation fare. She then started her own party, Sarah Game's Fair Go. I believe she was then kicked out of that party by other members. So Sarah Game got kicked out of Sarah Game. So, I mean, like we know this. We know the history of One Nation is, crazy shit happening all the time. A lack of vetting for a lot of candidates, both in them turning out to have, drawn a swastika on the lawn, or I guess are a gay dude who has a Muslim boyfriend or what have you. But I taken as a whole, I think it's all just a good reminder for people like you and myself who take politics pretty seriously and are pretty firmly committed to what we think. And to us, the idea of voting or supporting One Nation is just ridiculous. To the vast majority of Australians, that's just not true. It's just not true.
No.
They're much more ideologically wedded than you would think, and politics has gotten so bad. So little has changed. The status quo has delivered so little meaningful and tangible change, and politicians have been talking such shite and not delivering for such a long period of time, that it really doesn't seem that crazy to swing your vote all over the map. That's really not as nuts as it might appear to you or I.
No.
So maybe just finally on the subject before we move on to budget stuff, I mean, what does work? There was a piece in the Saturday paper that sort of looked at Labor's strategy towards One Nation and apparently was pointing to things like running on Pauline's previous positions on industrial relations. Apparently that does work. That's worked at the state level in the past, sort of exposing that idea that she's against, penalty rates or supporting something similar to work choices. Apparently Labor's had some success in that strategy before. And also apparently, even though it doesn't feel like this, drawing attention to her corporate backers or, getting massive support from billionaires. Apparently, even though it feels like she just gets a plane from Gina Reinhart and no one gives a shit and her supporters are like, woo, yeah, go Pauline. According to the research, that does actually seem to cut away at her support. This idea of exposing the lie that Pauline Hanson and One Nation present themselves as fighting for the working class and actually saying, well, here's the evidence, here's how they voted before. Is that the kind of thing you want to see the left and progressives do more of?
Yes, and so much more.
Yeah.
So not surprised that that's the ALP strategy. A little bit like quite frustrating, though, that it has taken the rise of Pauline Hanson for Labor to deliver probably the most ambitious budget that they've delivered in 15 years. Certainly it's a budget that I've been excited about, and I've not been excited about them for a long time. And that is really, really frustrating. And I would imagine really frustrating for Greens members as well, who have been trying to drag Labor to the left for the last 15 years as well, to see One Nation just come up out of nowhere. And now Labor's like, yeah, housing policy, negative gearing, capital gains, trusts. It's like, guys, the left has been saying this for so long, but the second a right-wing populist comes along, okay, we have to capitulate. So there is a lot that counters the far right. And it is, in fact, community, unionism, and religion. Those are the three prongs that are the right-wing fight back. So the reason I say those institutions isn't actually because there's anything particularly special about them. It's just that they bring people together who are not brought together by choice. So you and I, we can decide to hang out with all of our lefty mates and be in our little bubble and be very happy and be like, yeah, great, the world is wonderful. Nothing needs to change. But when you are in a workplace or you're part of a religious community, or even when you actually talk to your neighbors and get to know them, you have to talk to people who may not agree with you on everything, who may have very different perspectives and life experiences to you. And it's, I think, really hard for progressives, and I actually think it's easier for right-wingers. I think progressives find it really hard to bridge that divide. But that is the work. So the work is not saying you're a racist, I'm not talking to Uncle Fred again. If Uncle Fred's at Christmas, I won't be there. The work is actually, Uncle Fred, I want to understand why you were a Pauline Hanson voter. And it's not as well fighting with facts. So the political parties, the media, all of that, they're going to come out with all the facts. But people do not make their voting decisions based on facts. They say they do, but it's based on feelings, which is why when I got my dad 1 year really wanted to protest vote. He'd always been a Labor voter, but he was threatening to vote Liberal. And so I was like, Dad, if you want to protest vote, you have to vote Green. That's the only way that the Labor Party is going to listen to you. It was Labor Liberal seat. So I was like, actually stick it to him. But he, to this day, blames me for making him vote Green.
For what? For everything that's gone wrong with this country?
I'm like, Dad, I didn't hold your pencil in the voting booth and make you do this. Like, you did that. It's also okay. It's just one vote. But he really, I think it's like an identity thing, right? People are like, oh, but I'm not like that. And I think that what Pauline Hanson has made it sound like is Greens voters are soy boys, are weak men, whatever the fuck that means. But that, I think, is really getting to a lot of straight dudes. Anyway, sorry, back to the antidote to fighting the far right. It is building community. And so you'll see that like the unions right now are going around saying the vaccine to Nazis or the vaccine to one nation is unionism. And it's because in a workplace, most people work alongside people that they've never chosen. They don't share any values. They maybe say hello to them once or twice. But you all have the same enterprise bargaining agreement. You all have the same policies to live by. You all have the same bosses. So when something unfair happens, you have to unite because it is in your shared interest. And so I heard this amazing story from the 90s of like warehouse workers, like blue collar workers. And amongst them, there was a trans woman. And she was being treated like shit by the bosses. Like they were just being straight up transphobic. And her comrades, while they continued to use all the T slurs and say all the wrong things, they went on strike. They stood side by side and they said, we are not going back to work until she is safe. And I would much rather an old man who gets my pronouns wrong, but stands shoulder to shoulder with me on the picket line than a guy who gets my pronouns right and then screws me and my mates over at work. And that, exactly, right? and it's like, it's that assumption as well that these old warehouse worker dudes don't understand what trans women are going through and won't want to stand side by side with them. No, we all understand unfairness and we all understand looking after people that we care about. And that's ultimately all it is. And so it's the same thing with your neighbors. Like we all have a shared interest in, say, making sure that, I don't know, we have a zebra crossing at the end of the street or like something like that. And same with religious institutions. People come there because they want a sense of belonging. They, maybe have a higher power that they believe in, and they want to find people who share their values and build community with them. And now unions and religious institutions, they have their own money. Members pay and they resource their own things. And unions are democratic. So members decide what happens to their money. And I think that is fundamentally so different to a lot of the left-wing organising that has been happening through the non-profit world. Again, I'm also from the non-profit world, and it is imperfect. But having like single issue campaigns that just really narrowly focus on one thing and then being like, we expect people to volunteer their time on an issue that is outside of their normal day-to-day, you're only going to get people who are well off or retirees or young people. Those are the only people who are going to sign up to volunteer to do things additional to what they need. But when you're in a union or in a church community or with your neighbors, those are all needs that people have. And so you're dealing with their material needs immediately. And so people feel the change and see the change immediately. And it's why I'm also going around saying it's so important that Mamdani in New York is filling potholes because people need to see change immediately. And if you're walking down the street or driving down the street in New York, you're probably noticing all of those potholes. And if those potholes are gone, you go, Mayor did that. He said he was going to do that. Great, follow through. Because a big part of what's happening with the major parties is people don't trust them because they say, I will do X, Y, Z. And then you find out it's only applies to 5% of people. They have to live in blah, blah, blah. It's means tested and all of like 207 people can apply for that. And you go, okay, great. So housing affordability for them, that's wonderful. But what about the millions of other people that need it? Right now, the problems that we have are so massive that we need politicians who are willing to deliver at that scale. And I'm under no illusions that this current Albanese government is going to do that without kicking and screaming. And so the community needs to be building that community pressure. So if we are building community with our neighbours, I'm talking just your street, just your apartment block, like don't even go further than that. Building community through your work with your colleagues, or if you're religious, trying to build community through your religious institution, because you have full control. Like that organization has full control of the resources. You have people there from all walks of life who are willing to come together. And the work is coming to a shared understanding around your values. That is the hard part. But once you do it, you then have this amazing alignment that you can then go out into the community with and say, hey, Albanese, actually, we don't agree. We're a community of all these different people from all walks of life, and we want to see dental and Medicare. We want to see universal preschool, blah, blah, blah. So I think that is what it is going to take. And I think it's going to take the Greens, Labor, and Progressive Independents all coming together, united against Pauline Hanson. Can we do this? I don't know, but we have to.
We got to try.
We got to try. We need our little rainbow coalition of Care Bears all holding hands.
Yes, the world of celebrities. I always love it when a celebrity is honest enough to say, you know, I made a mistake. Not a stupid celebrity now, but someone who's woken up and says, I was stupid in the past. This is Dave Hughes, Hughesy, the stand-up comedian.
The capital gains tax, if I had have known they were going to do that, I wouldn't have voted for them. I voted for Elbow and Chalmers. They didn't have a mandate for changing capital gains tax. It's now the highest in the world. No one is going to want to invest in Australia. What doing?
Rest my case. Hughesy, anytime you want to come on Outsiders, please do.
All right. Now, I'm just conscious of time. We've just got a little bit of time left. I don't want to go too long or take up too much of your time, Neha, but I thought it was worth just touching on the budget. I mean, we're 3 weeks on now. Again, I'm out of the country, so I'm not as plugged in as normal, but I'm trying to figure out what the read is in terms of how this budget has landed. You've mentioned it's a budget you're very excited about. Of course, the right-wing crazies, including my friend, comedian Dave Hughes, has lost their minds. Small business owners are freaking out. You've got the right-wing media and, of course, the right-wing parties mounting a pretty massive challenge against it all and saying that the sky is falling because of Labor's breaking of a promise and these incredible changes that are going to hit ordinary Australians. I mean, generally speaking, how do you think this thing has landed with the Australian public and kind of in the political discourse right now?
I think there's a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are just going, huh? What happened? And I think that's partly a miscalculation from Labor because they very much came out swinging, ready to have a fight on housing. But they've ended up having a fight on trusts and tax, which they were a lot less prepared for. They were not prepared for the millennial small business owners, guys who think they're going to be tech billionaires, coming out threatening to move to Singapore or whatever. Like, go, do it then. You're not going to. But yeah, like the front page of the Daily Telegraph with the Communist Manifesto, I was like, please, I wish.
Yes,
Comrade Jim. Exactly. Yes. But no. And I think, so one, if the right wing are losing their minds, that means it is a decent enough budget that delivers enough for working people. It does not deliver what it should. A lot more needs to happen, but it is a budget that is making inroads to that. And I think the biggest risk right now is that Labor has taken a big leap. Again, it's the first vaguely left-wing thing that they've done in a long time that's really trying to push the needle. If they lose this fight, I'm worried that progressives are going to lose the housing and inequality fight for the next 5 to 6 years with conservative talking points taking over.
Yeah, I think, yes, confusing is a good way to put it. I mean, I've just tried to summarize some of the polling that I saw. Okay, let's try and have a look at this. The News poll said that a minority of voters in News poll, 47%, described the budget as bad, 31% said it was neither good or nor bad, 22% finding it good. According to the same poll, a majority, 52%, thought the budget would leave them worse off. So I guess that explains a small amount of the population who think that the budget will leave them worse off, but they still think it's good, I guess, or not bad, I suppose. A Demos AU poll for Capital Brief found this. By 43 to 23, respondents thought the budget was bad. By 53 to 16, they thought the tax changes would make it harder for the average Australian. And by 44 to 17, they thought the changes would hurt the economy. By 34 to 29, respondents approved of the changes to negative gearing, but they disapproved 29 to 28 of the changes to capital gains tax, and by 34 to 27 of the changes to family trusts. I couldn't believe this. By 42 to 38, respondents thought income from investments should be taxed at a lower rate than work income rather than similarly to work income. Okay, Neha is shaking their head in disgust. I'm like, that's crazy to me. Like, again, this was like the wisdom, right? Everyone on the left, from Greens to Labor think tanks, is like, of course we should tax wealth more highly than work, right? Like, we're working people. You actually do stuff to earn that money. That should be taxed at a lower rate than people just sitting on their ass and letting property or investments, provide this passive income, which is a massive driver of wealth inequality. But according to this poll, at least, no, apparently more people think investments should be taxed more lightly than going to work for 9 to 5 every goddamn day. What do we make of this?
So I think that this should be our very clear signal that we as progressives need to take a whole big step backwards when we're talking about economic inequality with people, because I've been having conversations with people, but I've also been talking to others who've been going out into the community and having these chats. And what we're finding again and again is that most working people who are not super politically switched on actually think that they're going to be a billionaire one day or could be a billionaire one day.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because you go, okay, millionaire status, that is theoretically realistic for a working person by the end of their life to potentially have made $1 million, most likely through their superannuation. Like by the time we all retire, our super portfolios should be in the millions, unless we have ended capitalism and live in a communist utopia. That's
it could go either way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really hope it goes the latter. But if it's the former, then I would like my superannuation portfolio there. So we are all shareholders, right? We're all asset owners in a way. But also, people really think that a billionaire is just 2 millionaires. So you go, okay, if you can, in theory, make $1 million in your lifetime, you can just make $1 billion. And I want to be like that. And a lot of people think that they are just one side hustle, one course, one Bitcoin purchase away from that, because everyone's heard a story of someone who's done it. And so we actually have to, I think, remind people what a billionaire is, how much $1 billion actually is. Like, I think someone explained it to me as you will have lived 1 million seconds by the time you're a child, but you will not have lived 1 billion seconds until you're 38. Like, I've not lived 1 billion seconds in my life yet.
Yeah, right.
And so how do we get this across to people? Because this is the lie that the billionaires are reliant on. Gina Reinhart, Clive Palmer, all of these people need us to think that we could become them. That's how they exploit us. I think, again, a big part of the work is recognizing where people are at and going, okay, I'm not just going to scream at them and call them racist, but I'm also going to try and understand why they think billionaires are good. What is it about the billionaire that you like? Is it like, because I'm making an assumption. I'm making the assumption that I think it's because you want to be a billionaire. Is that true? And then I think I saw this really great video that someone put up online that was Jeff Bezos walking through the Amazon warehouse. And as he was walking, he was like trying to be like one of the guys and was like going to talk to the workers talk to the janitor and everything and be like, see, I'm one of the people. And over his head, it's got how much money he's making just in walking through the warehouse, because he's an asset owner. Yeah. He doesn't make money by working. So his assets are constantly going up. And then how much money the janitor was making in the same conversation. And you could see over Bezos's head, like millions and millions of dollars being made. And then over the janitor's head, 30 cents, 50 cents. And I think that is the sort of thing that we need to be taking to people and showing them that wealth is your wealth. That's money that you made when you went to work at Hancock Prospecting or wherever you work for Qantas, whoever. These tax-dodging billionaires and corporations, they're taking your money, they're keeping it for themselves, for their shareholders, and they expect you to keep paying more tax. Whereas the way that you're actually going to build wealth is by having more money in your pocket.
Again, the response initially, we had Barbara Pocock on the podcast to respond to the budget. And of course, the Greens have been running the Tax the 1% campaign. They would describe the budget as a budget for the 1%. And if you're a billionaire and stuff, and if you're in the top 1%, you're going to do pretty well. This budget doesn't go far enough. That was the general vibe. On the housing question, I think the general vibe from the party has been a step in the right direction, but doesn't go far enough. And now the debate seems to be like, will the Greens actually pass this through? The government is keen to get this all done before the Parliament rises in July. There'll be a quick Senate inquiry, I believe. And the Greens seem to be sort of standing their ground on the grandfathering of negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions, particularly like limiting the number of properties that one could negatively gear. So yes, you might maintain the grandfathering, but you would actually say, okay, but you can only do that for one property as opposed to the 150 or what have you that some people have. I mean, if I'm honest, I would say I feel like the party's been in a difficult position where it's like we've been calling for these kind of changes for a long time. I think a level of recognizing the credit and the move that has been taken here is important and at least makes you sound reasonable, and I think does have a correspondence to reality. But I do keep coming back to the basic facts, which comes out of Treasury's own modelling here, which is this is going to apparently reduce the supply of housing by 35,000 houses, apparently. It's not going to make housing cheaper. It's going to slow the growth of housing by 2% over the next little while. It's going to increase rent by $2 a month, $2 a week rather. This is all Treasury's own modelling about what these changes are going to do. So I think to say that this is not going to make a serious change to the housing crisis in Australia isn't an unreasonable position to take. But I guess I also feel like they're somewhat politically snookered here. Like, what are they going to do? Vote against these changes? How much power are they going to wield in actually making any kind of, or extracting any concessions in the parliamentary fight? I don't know. What do you think about that?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think what's missing here is a bit of a community mandate almost. Like I think I've been exceptionally frustrated that the media class, the mainstream, I guess the traditional old school media have just been pushing this elbows broken a lie line. No, I think governments should break more promises if they are for people and if that is what people want. Break them all. I mean, it was Howard who came up with the bloody core and non-core promise idea.
Right.
And he came up with the idea of breaking them. Why are we still going on about this? Like, we should be looking at where is society at? Where are the problems at? And what is the government doing to deal with them? Now, around the Greens passing it and everything, yeah, I think it is a really difficult position to be in because yes, there are. I think very, very safe to say that it does not go far enough, that the housing crisis is in such dire straits that really these changes needed to happen 15 years ago when we were all calling for them then. This needed to happen at the 2019 election when bloody Bill Shorten went to the election with it. But here we are. And yeah, it's almost like a theory of change question. And in this day and age, I think all the rules are out the window. I think everything that we know about politics is now a giant question mark. And so, maybe a year ago I would have said, I think that the Greens should try and get some good amendments and then pass this budget. And I still, my instinct is still there, but I'm also kind of like, people want to blow things up. People are angry. People want to see serious change. And maybe if the Greens are calling for more and calling for something that pushes Labor even more and in a way that stands out next to Pauline Hanson, well, maybe that will bring another group of people to the left. So I'm actually not sure because I don't think the rules of politics that we've had for the last 30 years, I don't think we should follow them anymore. And I think that the current, like the Labor Parliamentary Caucus, the Liberal Caucus are certainly, and to an extent, I think sometimes the Greens do as well, still kind of operate in that, like the way that we have been doing for the last 10 to 20 years. But I think Pauline Hanson's rise is such an indication that people hate the status quo. They want things to seriously change. And so maybe this is an opportunity for the Greens to do something really big. I don't know how that would go, but it's worth a shot.
It's worth trying to do something. Well, we'll continue asking those questions on this podcast. It's been a recurring theme as to what the fuck we should do in these trying times. We'll leave it there for this week's episode. Thank you so much, Neha. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for being on Serious Danger.
It's been a lot of fun.
Call to action. Do you want to give a shout out? If people check out Neha's link tree, there are a range of things that Neha is talking about there to make the world a better place and to fight the far right and be a cool anti-racist person. What would you give a shout out to when it comes to listeners of this show about how they can join that fight?
Yeah. So there is very little funding in Australia for directly for anti-racism initiatives. And my friends and I, a few years ago, came up with this organization called Democracy in Colour, led by and for people of colour to fight for economic and racial justice. Now, this organization relies on donations from people like us, giving $20 a month or less, whatever you can afford. But that means untied funding for the organization to be as bold and anti-racist as it likes, so that they don't have to go back and report to funders and say, oh, well, we're being nice to the billionaires because you're a billionaire. They don't have to do that if they're funded by everyday people. So go and check out Democracy in Colour, but don't let that be the only thing you do. I want every single person to walk away from this ready to have conversations with people in their life about the far right. Each and every one of us, not just white people. If you're a migrant, if you're queer, anyone and everyone needs to be identifying people in their lives who are kind of going, oh, One Nation's got some good ideas. And don't kind of grab them and go, I really need to talk to you about this. I've just got to change your mind. Please don't do that. And I know it can be hard. Like I am the autistic ADHD combo. I know that these things take emotional intelligence, and that can sometimes be hard for neurodivergent people. But if I can do it, you can do it. And I hate talking to people. So if you I do it because it's effective. That's why. That's the only reason I do it. And so if you've got an Uncle Fred who is like, I'm thinking of voting One Nation, or if you've got a mum or an auntie who's saying that, ask them why. Get at the feelings underneath what they're saying. They're going, oh, there's too much immigration. Why do you think that? What do you think would change if we changed immigration? Okay, we have more houses. What other things would change? Do you think there might be a doctor shortage, for example? Or reminding them about immigrants in their life as well can be a really good one. Because often what happens is people go, I don't like all these immigrants, but I love Priya next door. She's great. We always eat her curry. And I was like, Priya is an immigrant. You are also an immigrant unless you're Indigenous, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. But have those conversations and try and understand. Don't fight on the facts. Don't even touch the facts. Just get at the why and the how and find the feeling. Once you find the feeling, connect it to a shared value, right? So maybe we all value our friends. We value a fair go. Do you think Pauline's desire to deport people, or do you think Pauline taking money from Gina Reinhart is going to make a difference? Like I've been saying to One Nation voters, Pauline gets money from Gina Reinhart. And they go, well, so does the Labor Party. What do you have to say to that? I was go, okay, so if the Labor Party gets money from billionaires, Pauline gets money from billionaires, why is she going to do anything different? There's no answer.
Nice.
And so that is then your opening to have those conversations. But you're doing this over weeks and months. This is a long-term project. This is not going to happen overnight.
You know who doesn't get money from billionaires? A little party called the Greens. That's what I do. That's what I slip in there. But maybe you can let them make their own conclusions there. But that's a good one. All right. Thank you so much, Neha. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.